Civil rights activists in Los Angeles are really in an uproar over a decision made by the new Trump appointed interim LA district attorney. The DA offered a post trial plea deal to a former officer convicted of using excessive force on a black woman during a shoplifting investigation. The former deputy, Trevor Kirk, was found guilty in February of using excessive force after throwing a woman to the ground outside a supermarket. The actual conviction was on deprivation of rights under color of law. This happened 2 years ago. The deputy was responding to a robbery in the area and thought that she fit the suspect's description. Here's just some of what happened next.
No, you can't touch me. You can't touch me. Get down on the ground. Get on the ground. Stop.
Once the deputy throws her onto the ground, he pins her then into place, a knee on her. The woman screams that she can't breathe, and shortly after, Deputy Kirk sprays her face with pepper spray. Under the current conviction, Kirk would be found guilty of felony and then face up to 10 years in jail. The plea deal would change the felony conviction to a misdemeanor, reduce the sentence to 1 year in jail, but the prosecution has signaled it was willing to recommend a year of probation instead. The judge in the case will consider the plea deal at Kirk's sentencing hearing on Monday. Now, in a moment, I'll speak to the civil rights attorney calling this deal illegal. But first, joining us is Trevor Kirk's attorney, Tom Yu. Tom, good morning to you. So your client has already been convicted. A jury has found him guilty of this felony. Why should that jury's finding, that verdict, be set aside?
Well, because under the law, a prosecutor can make that motion as long as there's some basis for that U.S. attorney to make that motion. It's subject to the court's approval. And once that's approved, it is lawful and it is legal to do that.
But your request to have this verdict set aside that I read, it doesn't suggest that there's any jury misconduct, that the jury did anything wrong, right?
Yes, sir. So let me just kind of set the record straight. This misdemeanor plea was always on the table prior to the jury trial beginning. This was offered to Deputy Kirk in December of 2024. And I just want to make sure this is on the record that I'm not suggesting there's anything that the jury did wrong. The law allows a prosecutor to make this motion even after a post-verdict or even after if a defendant gets convicted to undo the verdict and to recommend or even dismiss the case.
Okay, two things. The woman in the video, her attorney is going to join us next, and she says it's illegal, so we'll hear that side of it. However, when you say it's always been on the table, at some point, you took it off the table on your client's behalf, right? Because it got to the jury to deliberate. You rejected that offer, and then Mr. Kirk was convicted. So to say that it was always on the table, that can't be true because the jury got to actually deliberate and deliver a verdict. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong in that, but that's only half the story. I mean, the misdemeanor plea was not something that was fabricated or came in after Mr. Trump was elected, as a lot of the mainstream media has suggested. This misdemeanor plea, sir, was always on the table, meaning the Biden administration's DOJ offered that to Deputy Kirk in December 2024. And you're right. We did take it off the table, but it was not completely off the table. And then it's still on the table, in which if the judge accepts that.
What's not completely off the table? If you say no and then take your chance with the jury, then it's not an option anymore. I mean, so here's the follow-up, because we're running low on this half of the conversation. Why this case over any other? Because if there is a plea deal offered to anyone who's on trial and they say, no, we're not going to take it, but after the jury finds me guilty, I'll go back and try to get that deal that would put me in a much better position than I am now. Why does this case deserve that? And because everybody would want that deal.
Right. Well, Deputy Kirk was, in our view, doing his job the way he was trained to do. And that's the short of it, is that he was trying to do his job. Yes, there was a verdict. We respect the verdict. However, we respect but do not agree with it. And hence, this process allows a prosecutor to review the case in light of their view to ascertain whether or not they should seek a dismissal or a lesser charge, like in this case.
All right, Tom Yu, thank you very much. Now let's bring in attorney Caree Harper. Her client is the woman thrown to the ground by former Deputy Kirk. Thank you for being here. Your reaction, what you just heard from Tom Yu.
Well, thank you for having me, sir, first off. And Mr. Yu's statements were totally ridiculous. He did not answer your question. He did not give you one single reason why his client should get this post-verdict sweetheart misdemeanor deal. Getting this deal would put his client back on patrol at a city near you. Okay, let's just keep it straight. If he doesn't have a felony conviction, he can still apply and receive a job as a peace officer. In fact, our investigations have led us to believe that he already has a job out of state as long as he doesn't get caught with this felony on his record. Also, it is incorrect. Mr. Yu's statement is wholly false in that Mr. Kirk was performing his duties in the way that he was trained to do. The jury found the exact opposite. They heard the testimony of my expert and the prosecution's expert, Roger Clark, that said he totally performed below standard. He failed at his job. He is not a hero doing his job and just made a mistake. No, he was wrong and intentional. Furthermore, it should be known, let's set the record straight, that Deputy Kirk has a pattern of violence against women. He was arrested in January 2023 for beating his wife and throwing her down in the exact fashion that he threw my client down.
Okay, so let me say a couple of things. CNN has not confirmed. We don't have any information about another job offer or domestic violence against a previous partner. But let me ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Yu. Why this case? I mean, he says it's legal that there can be a post-conviction plea deal. I have never heard of it. Of course, I'm not an attorney. But why this case and this offer now?
Because there are a lot of MAGA supporters that have taken this deputy up as their poster boy for wrongdoing against peace officers. And now they have a sympathetic ear in the new administration. So there are local folks here that were campaigning with the president and who asked him to literally intervene and issue a pardon in this case. So that's why now it's because it's a new administration and they want to set some type of tone about how they're going to tolerate police misconduct. Also, it's public record. Mr. Kirk's arrest for domestic violence, January 2024, I misspoke, 2024, is public record. It was covered by most of the news stations when it occurred. So he has a pattern. And in the cases where the court has corrected and allowed a post-verdict plea, there's been an error on the parts of the prosecution, or there's a showing of good cause. There is no cause. As a matter of fact, it's bad cause.
Caree Harper, thank you so much for being part of the conversation this morning.
Thank you for having me.